Spotlight On is brought to you by Light, the technology platform reimagining e-commerce for live events. You can learn more about Light at light.com/partnerships. That is lyte.com/partnerships.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight On. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. This week, the spotlight shines on Scott Register. Reg is head of A&R for ThinkIndie, the music distribution company founded by the Coalition of Independent Music Stores way back in 1999. He's been an influential force behind Record Store Day and is a tireless advocate for independent music and artists. Reg hosts Birmingham Mountain Radio's weekday morning show, The Morning Blend, and for some 20-odd years, he's also hosted the popular 4-hour Sunday morning show, Reg's Coffee House. Reg is an incredible supporter of music, musicians, and a wise student of the business. I hope you enjoy our discussion. Hey!
Hey, man, how are you? Sorry about that. Somehow I don't usually use headphones for these things, and somehow the headphone jack, it wasn't in the jack correctly.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it. I'm glad that was it. It was just something simple.
You sound crystal clear.
Excellent. I can hear you well.
Good.
Too.
Good. How you doing?
I'm great. I'm doing great. Just staying busy and healthy. And, you know, a year and a half ago when this whole thing started, it was like, oh, man, what am I going to do for a living? But turns out when you put people in their homes and don't let them do anything, they buy a whole lot of recorded physical music.
It's incredible, isn't it? It's really incredible.
It's kind of crazy. It really is.
Well, listen, that actually is a helpful place to kick off because there's sort of two paths I want to cover with you. One is obviously you and your background, and I want to talk to you about your time as a broadcaster and sort of someone people trust in terms of taste for music. But I also want to talk a little bit about the state of independent music.
Okay.
From the business point of view. So maybe we could start there and work our way back.
Sure.
So could you maybe continue on that thread a little bit? What did you see? What did you see during the pandemic and what are you seeing coming out of it?
Well, you know, I think when it started, it was like everybody else. It was no one knew what the heck was going to happen, what was going on. And it took a few weeks for everything to settle out. You know, one of the first things we had to deal with was we knew that Record Store Day wasn't going to happen on Record Store Day in April. So we had to deal with figuring out what we were going to do with Record Store Day and what we were going to do with the product that we already had sitting in the warehouse and what we were going to do with product that we knew wasn't going to be ready. So that was one of the first things we dealt with along with the group over at Record Store Day. And, you know, we ended up making it multiple days over the summer and ended up actually working out quite well when it was all said and done. We had to bump titles here and there because they couldn't get them ready in time because of production issues, but you know, it wasn't near as hectic as I had thought it was going to be. You know, we had everybody just kind of put the brakes on, so that was one of the toughest things to deal with. And a lot of people, you know, one of Widespread Panic's one of my clients, and they were like, we can't wait 3-4 months to put out this box set that we were going to put out on Record Store Day. So we went ahead and did it on the date anyway, and it ended up being, you know, we ended up selling them, and it ended up being something good for my warehouse to be able to work on when everybody was figuring out everything. You know, I didn't blame the industry for slowing down production of catalog and stuff because who knew what was going to happen, you know. But again, you fast forward a year and a half, and it's like, wow, people really rallied around recorded music, around physical product. You know, I can look as far as my den in my house. My two sons, my 20-year-old and 17-year-old son at the time, they suddenly were like, hey, we want a turntable. Hey, we want vinyl, and sat around listening to all kinds of music together. And now they both have turntables and vinyl off at college. Yeah, I was helping my 18-year-old move in. And they, when we were moving his turntable in, people were just oohing and eyeing, you know, parents and kids, which was hilarious to watch because it's like, where did you get that? Where do we get one of those? it was kids still listen to that. It's like, yes, kids still listen to that. You have totally missed out on what's been going on the last few years.
Yeah.
The thing is, they're all like, that's awesome. No one's like, oh, that's weird. Why would they do that? Everybody's just like, that's amazing. So it was, I think a lot of people who hadn't quite gotten into it did get into it. And I mean, now, heck, we can't get it made fast enough. That's one of my buddies owns a plant over in Athens. And we were talking, he's like, in March of 2020, I was everybody's best friend. I
getting fruit baskets.
Like, I didn't know what I was going to do with the plant. Didn't know if we'd be around. I was trying to figure the whole thing out. And then fast forward a year, and it's like everybody hates me. I bought the building, and we have jobs lined up for months on top of months. So I don't think, again, no one knew what was going to happen, and then no one could have foreseen the supply chain breaks. It took a little longer to catch up with us, I think, than it did some of the other industries, but it caught up, and it's definitely caught up now. I mean, I'm putting stuff out right now that I was supposed to put out almost a year ago. So everything from PVC pellets for colored vinyl to running out of cardboard and not being able to make sleeves. So, I quit saying I can't believe this many months ago, because if it can happen, it just might happen.
Yeah. Well, I remember there, of course, there were vinyl capacity issues and a lot of angst around vinyl capacity, even pre-pandemic. So do you think what we're going through now, were we going to be here anyway? And or is the pandemic, like, to your point, like even secondary things like the raw material, that wasn't the problem before?
I think stuff like that, chemicals and raw materials, that definitely, I don't think would have gotten here as quickly. I mean, or they would have been able to fix it quickly, more quickly than they can at the moment, because it's a trickle down effect. If one thing's missing, then that messes up other things, and it's definitely makes things a little more difficult. But from everybody I talked to, things were going so well. People were adding presses where they could. New plants were opening up. I feel like now, like I did back in the mid 2000s, when the demand was there, but there wasn't enough capacity to fill it because there weren't enough plants. Well, now I feel like there's a good amount of plants, but the capacity, the demand shot up faster than capacity could keep up with, combined with the supply chain breaks and with shipping problems. I got stuff riding around on trucks for weeks. I got stuff sitting in Amazon warehouses FedEx warehouses for weeks. It's stuff sitting across town in a FedEx warehouse, and it's like, when's this going to show up at we're 10 minutes away from you. When's this going to show up in my door?
Yeah.
So it messes with street dates. It messes with shipping, but it's like I've been telling everybody, it's like, it could be worse. There could be nothing sitting in that warehouse and nothing sitting in our warehouse, and us going, what are we going to sell and what are we going to do? I mean, it stinks, but at least people want it, and if they really want it, they'll be patient and they'll get it when we can get it to them, and that's the bottom line. And there's still plenty of stuff out there. It's not like there's nothing to be bought. I just know, people want new stuff, and we're getting it out as fast as we can. That's the best we can do. I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have all this stuff, but we're dealing with it, and everybody just needs to. Do you think it's a headache not being able to buy it? You should see how big a headache it is trying to make it and ship it and get it out.
Yeah.
If we can be cool with it, the consumer can be cool with it. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I've had a year and a half of the same thing of projects that have been impacted by it on the recorded music side. We had a Keith piece for Record Store Day that wound up coming out in the summer.
Right.
We had a box set at the beginning of the pandemic that hit supply chain and manufacturing issues. We had one now that we're knee deep in that. So yeah, I mean, the interesting thing hearing from you though on this is that you seem, I'm interpreting this a little bit, but it feels like you're a little bit on the other side of it in terms of, like, I expected you to be a bit more freaked out and like
Well, I'd love to be freaked out, but we're too busy to be freaked out. I mean, there's still stuff going out. I mean, yeah, I've got a backlog of stuff I need to get into the warehouse and get shipped out, but it's coming. I just don't necessarily know when, but it's coming. And you know, what we do is we get it out as we get it, and then if it doesn't get here, we bump street dates. That's just all you can do. But it's not like my warehouse is just quiet back there and everybody's sitting around. I mean, we just finished up Record Store Day Black Friday, and it was all hands on deck. I mean, if anything, getting people to work in the warehouse has been harder than getting the product in there. So that's you know.
So you're seeing that too. You're having that same.
I was in the back for 3 weeks pulling orders, you know, and I know that's not what my bosses want me to be doing, but that was the most important thing to be done at the time, and we needed hands. So even my GM was in the back packing boxes.
Yeah,
everybody
keeps you humble.
But it also shows the entire team that this is what we do. At the end of the day, this is what we do, and no one's above doing it. Our job, the way we make money, is getting these records to these stores, and if it takes all of us back there pick, pack, and shipping, then that's what happens. I mean, there's no ego involved. We love what we do. There's a reason why we're here. You know, nobody's getting super rich off of distribution, especially indie distribution. It's about connecting these artists to fans and keeping the indie record stores alive, and that's what we do. I mean, that's I've been doing it for 22 years, and the mission has never changed. Yeah. You know, and so if anything, you try to make it fun. It's like, how many of these orders can I pull in an hour? You know, and the other thing that came about, keeping an eye on the positive, during COVID, is all the stores who had drugged their feet about selling online and having D2C through their stores, they all were forced to be better stores and to up their game. And the people who were already doing it, like I have a store here in Birmingham, a friend of mine, Dan, over at Seasick Records, they were already a great online store. You know, they do great business, you know, brick and mortar business, but he had already perfected the online, and he had to work 10 times harder because all he was doing was shipping out products, but he was filling up mail trucks on a daily basis, you know, because people wanted the product. And so you had to pivot. And seeing some of these stores who hadn't done much online be forced to do it, and then to see how good it could be for their store, that was something that, you know, it took a pandemic to make it happen, but now most of the stores that I deal with have figured that out and are growing their online presence and selling not just in their community, but all over the place to people who want what they have.
Let me ask you about that. Were the stores, what was their hesitation? Were they skeptical that there was a place for them in the world of Amazons, or was it just, I didn't get into this to have a website, I want to have my shop? Like, what?
I think it was a little bit of everything. I think it just depended on the store owner and who you talk to. You know, some people that just wasn't their thing, and some of the older store owners that just, you know, that's not where they lived. I wouldn't say there was one overriding key to it all. I think it was just a combination of, you know, depending on a store's preference. But when suddenly you can't have people in your store and you're forced to do it, you see how important it is. I would never say easy. It's not easy. D2C is a lot of work. But if you want to, you know, I've likened us to cockroaches since the day I started working in indie retail. We are nimble. We do what we have to do to survive, and this is what we do. You know, a store owner once said, I sell records, or I'm going to be selling shoes, and I don't want to sell shoes. I want to sell records. So,
well, let me just ask you a couple of other questions in terms of the like where the business is and where it's going. Mm-hmm. So it feels like now we're well into a decade of sort of, in air quotes, the return of vinyl, or the vinyl resurgence.
The fad.
Yeah, the fad, exactly.
The longest fad I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's incredible. So what are some of the better minds in especially indie retail and at the indie label level thinking about the trajectory from here? It seems like everything that comes along is just additive to the resurgence. Like there's been very few setbacks, even here in the supply chain and the manufacturing issues. It's like this thing just keeps plowing forward, getting bigger. Yeah. Where do we go now?
That's a great question, because I think back to 2004, 2005, when we were seeing 10 and 15% of overall sales being new vinyl and used vinyl.
Yeah, vinyl was an event. Like if somebody did vinyl, it was a big deal.
It's like, wow, you got vinyl, amazing. Or it was a promo piece. Yeah, we made 200 pieces of vinyl just to give out to our friends and to fans. So I'd go to conventions, and mostly radio conventions, some retail conventions. The retail conventions, they already knew about it, but you go to a radio convention and people will be like, well, what's going on in the world of retail? And I'd be like, well, believe it or not, vinyl is resurgent. We're having a vinyl resurgent, and there'll be laughter. You would hear people laugh around the room, and it'd be like, no, seriously, 15% of overall sales last year were new vinyl, and we can't get turntables in fast enough, and they're blowing out the door. But no one, you could tell the skepticism. There would be a few people who were interested, but everybody else like, whatever. That'll next year he won't be talking about. Well, then I go back the next year and say, hey, 20% last year, and then you'd hear less laughter. And then another year go by and be like 30%, you'd hear less laughter. And then eventually, and even at retail, you're talking to the stores, you'd hear about it, but when you're talking to the labels or the big distros, they'd look at their numbers and be like, y'all are crazy. There's, the life of sales on vinyl for this album's not, they just didn't seem to be taking it seriously. But the indie retailers and some of the folks at the labels and the distributors, they saw what was happening, and they weren't willing to dismiss it as a fad. I laugh when I hear the word fad these days. Like, how many fads last almost 20 years? That's not a fad, that's a movement. And the movement is still going strong. All you have to do is look at last Friday for Record Store Day, Black Friday, and to see how much was sold, and to see how excited people get about these special editions and limited edition pieces. But then, then you want to go the opposite end. You look at all the stories that broke about Adele and Ed Sheeran, and the amount of vinyl they pressed. Do you think that Adele's team would press up that much vinyl if they thought it was a fad?
That's right. The biggest mainstream artists on the planet are, that's the piece, to your point, that's the piece of that story everybody's missing, is like, if the largest artists are doing it at that scale, that's kind of hard to dismiss as a niche.
Yeah, it's not a niche. When they're locking up all the pressing plants so they can make their 500,000 pieces of vinyl, it's not a niche. I mean, and I'm not, it's not like we're looking at what CDs were doing in the late 80s, early 90s into the early 2000s. I mean, that was crazy. I don't know that that'll ever happen again. But I can't stand when I hear people say, "Oh, this vinyl thing is, you should ignore it. It's stupid. It's not real." It's how can you look at what's going on and say it's not real?
You could almost imagine a world where an Adele or somebody like that, if they focused on it, might be able to ship platinum and vinyl.
It's possible. If the record's good enough, people want it. I don't ever say no about it. The one thing that in my short 22 years in this business have taken away is never say never. I mean, there's always weird things happen in the music business. And, I love seeing people get excited about physical product, whether it's an LP or a CD or a cassette or whatever it is. We sold a bunch of cassettes.
I was going to say, you had to say cassette. So what's the deal with that?
It's too early for me to, I just don't know.
I'm afraid to call it a fad.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I didn't want to say it, but yeah, I'm afraid to call it a fad, because the next thing you know, we'll be doing this 10 years from now going, hey, did you see that Adele made,
Adele 40 is going to go platinum on cassette.
It's bizarre, but and then people are like, well, they're just getting them as collectibles. And like, then why can't we keep boom boxes in stock in the stores? The vintage boom boxes. And now when you see a Sony putting out a boombox that looks like a vintage boombox, it's got all the bells and whistles of the new stuff, but it looks like it's got Bluetooth, but it still looks like what you saw people carrying on their shoulders back in the 80s. It's like there's something going on. I don't know what it is. I'm not willing to put my money on it just yet, but at the same time, we have been already putting our money on it, and it's happening. I just sold a whole bunch of Avett Brothers Emotionalism and Jada McPherson's Socks Christmas album on cassette, and it's just, hey, it's fun. At the end of the day, it's fun to see this happening,
Yeah.
I remember when I told my grandfather that I was going to work in this industry, he thought I had lost my mind. I mean, he was worked for the IRS and was a numbers guy, and he's like, just what is wrong with you? You'll be looking for a new job soon. Say, no, that this is where I'm supposed to be. And immediately, hey, what are you going to do when indie retail goes under because of, at the time it was Napster? And then, hey, what are you going to do when indie retail goes under because the big boxes? Hey, what are you going to do when indie retail goes under because of downloading? I mean, because of download stores. Hey, what are you going to do when streaming kills independent retail? Well, guess what? It's been 22 years for me and a lot longer for a lot of the guys I work with, and we're still here. And the only one of the other things that's really doing a ton with music is streaming. And I contend that streaming, at the end of the day, fans still want to own physical. So if they fall in love with something they're streaming, they're going to go get it. They just basically have a listening station in their pocket all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no different than walking in the store and putting on headphones and checking out a CD back in the day and going, I want to buy this one. This is not as good as I thought it was. I'm not going to get it. So, I mean, again, daily I get texts from my kids going, hey, can you get this? They want the vinyl of this album. They want the vinyl of that album. And it's goes back to, in my opinion, it goes back to community. They like that their friends come into their dorm room and see their vinyl crates and start flipping through it and going, hey, what's this? Hey, what's this? It's a status symbol, Yeah. I had my kid plays soccer at college, and one of his teammates' parents came up to me a game and they're like, my kid's discovering all kinds of new music that I love through your kid, because he's listening to a lot of the stuff that obviously you love, and my kid has no idea who that stuff is, and he's never been interested in what I'm listening to, but he's interested in it now because your kid listens to it. And I'm like, awesome, that's how we do this. That's how it works. Community sharing and growing and new fans. I took several of his teammates to a My Morning Jacket show a couple of weeks ago, and they were just happy as could be. And we did a Manchester Orchestra show, and it's like, I'm 52, my kid's 18. That's how I ended up in this business. My mom, I was a sponge. When she was listening to stuff, I was soaking myself up with it and falling in love with music. And I don't think she even knew it at the time.
Yeah.
So
it's really fun to do that with kids, though. I appreciate you telling me that, because I have very similar experience. My son is 16, and music is something we do a lot together. Just last weekend, I took him to Austin to see his first Stone show.
Nice.
And our first show coming out of the pandemic was his idea to go to. It was Herbie Hancock at the Paramount Theater.
Cool.
And like the fact that my kid wanted to go see Herbie Hancock, and it was phenomenal. And
I'm sure it was.
We go to a lot of shows together. He turns me on the music. We discover music together. But the other thing that's interesting about young people and vinyl is something you said earlier on when you were taking your son to school, which is we forget because we're so close to it. But when you're out in the wild and vinyl comes up or turntables come up and you talk to people who aren't in the industry, they are so excited about it. Like that to me is what the indicator of how much green field is still left in this sort of revival, is that there's so many people that don't even realize that vinyl's back and available, that if they did know, holy shit, I would argue that we're still so much closer to the beginning.
I hear, are you kidding me? And is that a turntable? And is that an album? So much. It's just like, yeah, you didn't know this is the way of the world right now for music lovers. There's a lot of music lovers. This is where they reside. It's not, my kids stream like crazy, but
Yep.
they see the difference in streaming their favorite Mac Miller album and owning their favorite Mac Miller album.
Yep.
They see that, they recognize that, and it's, again, it comes down to fandom. If you're a fan, if you're really a fan, you're going to own all you can from that artist. If you're a casual fan, maybe not so, but if you're a fan, it's not good enough to just be able to stream it on your phone or in your car. You want to be able to pull out that vinyl and be like, pull out the special colored version. Palm Morning Jacket just announced that they're putting Okonos back out on vinyl, and there's all these different variants, and my kid's head is exploding. So.
Yeah, it's fun. I guess the other question I had on this topic before we start to dig into the man is, do you think that there's a segment of the business that wanted or wants physical to go away just because it's more complicated than digital? Has that notion, or is that, I mean, I know being in,
that notion's always been around. There's all, is it cheaper and easier to stream all the music and not have any physical? Sure it is. Will some people get out of it? Probably, but will there always be somebody that sees the value in it? I'd say definitely. And, I know a group of hundreds and hundreds of independent record stores that definitely see the value in it and aren't going anywhere, and there's new stores opening every day, and there's young people opening up stores now because they got into the culture. And I think it's foolish to say that there'll be a day when there's no physical product. It's just, when they release digital books, you heard, oh, no one's going to want to read a book. No, people still want to hold a book in their hands and still want to smell the print and the paper. Will the numbers ever be crazy like they were before all this technology? Probably not. But they've adjusted themselves to where you can still make a living and it still matters, and you still need to have it. When your fans are leaving a show, they want to buy something from you. They don't want to leave without music. They want to be able to take a part of it home with them. And you see it in the stores every day. People come in there because it's the culture they live in. It's a part of their daily life. But yeah, to answer your question, sure, there's people in this business that would love to not have to worry about shipping 10,000 pieces of vinyl and having thousands of them be damaged because somebody at a shipping company stacked something heavy on top of something that says "do not stack." I see it every day. That's one of the things that drives me the most crazy is how hard it is to ship vinyl without it getting damaged, because there's a bunch of people who don't get it or don't care, in the chain. Oh, hey, we just nicked the side of that pallet with a lift. Oh, well,
I find it heartbreaking too. There's this weird visceral reaction. Man. I'm like, oh, you can't.
I get sick to my stomach some days. It's
really,
how could you bring that to our door? I would be ashamed to bring that to our door.
Yeah, and knowing how precious the commodity is, that it can't, I can't just go get 500 more to replace that box.
When something's limited edition and they only made 1,000 of them and 600 of them have corner bins, it's like, okay, well, we can repackage 600, which is not very cost effective, but you end up having to do it because you can't get it anymore. It's not a perfect system. I don't think there's any way to make it a perfect system, but as long as there's demand for it, why would you not fill that demand? And I think we've seen, after going on 20 years of it, and it's still growing at an exponential clip, demand doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Because again, this is a movement and a culture, not a fad.
Yeah.
Fads don't last 2 decades.
Let me ask you this. Can you explain for listeners, and actually I'll be the proxy because it would be helpful for me. What is your gig?
Well, I can tell you this, my wife and my kids don't understand it. So No, I came out of journalism school in the early 90s, went to work for a PR marketing firm, ended up doing PR and marketing for a big music festival at the time when there weren't a ton of music festivals around. There was a very large 17-block city festival here in Birmingham, Alabama, that I ended up working on radio promotions and programming for, called City Stages. And through that, met a lot of people, started working with the radio stations, met a guy named Dave Rossi, who was a program director here in town, talking music with him. He's like, man, you know a lot about the AAA music. That he had come from a AAA station to an alternative station. He's like, I want to do a show that's AAA oriented and new music show, and stuff that people might not know about that maybe not be new, but it's new to them. It's like, you interested in a show? Yeah, whatever, man. It sounds fun. I thought he wanted me to program a show, but he actually wanted me to do a show. And I started that show in January, 25 years in January 1997. Regis Coffee House started the third Sunday of that month. And, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea where I was going. He gave me a producer for 6 weeks and said, if you can't do it after 6 weeks, show's over. So I'm sitting there going, well, I guess this is going to be a 6-week show. And fast forward, we're 25 years in. I've been on several stations, survived all kinds of crazy stuff that, corporate decisions and whatnot. But through that and through City Stages and through my specialty show, got to know a guy named Don Van Cleve, who's a manager with Red Light now, but who was owned an independent record store here in town called Magic Platter at the time, and was elected to run a group of independent music stores as a marketing company called the Coalition of Independent Music Stores. So it was a group of some of the best indie stores in the country, and they got together to help get more ad dollars out of the labels. Instead of the labels having to call 40 different accounts, they called one person. There were programs within the marketing group. They wrote one check, and then Sims funneled it all out to the stores and got everything to the stores they needed to do the marketing program. And it created a network across the country where stores were pushing the same title and trying to break new artists. And it was very, at the time, it was pretty groundbreaking for the industry. I would go to Don for music because I knew he'd have a bucket of new stuff that wasn't out yet sitting behind his desk. And I'd go in once or twice a week and thumb through it and be like, oh, I want to check this out. I want to check this out. And then I'd put it on the air on Sundays. And things started popping. And we started, between his store and the radio show and the radio station and a local TV station that was really into music, Fox affiliate here, WBRC, they'd bring if we had a band that was popping, the band come to town, they'd bring them and put them on the TV. And it was just the synergy for several years here in Birmingham. It took us from a market that wasn't known for breaking music to being a tastemaker market in very short amount of time. So I got through that relationship with Don. He ended up hiring me to run some of the marketing programs at the Coalition of Independent Music Store. I did that for several years. And then after about a little less than 10 years, Don decided to get into management and get out of retail. He had sold his store a few years earlier, or he'd shut down his store a few years earlier to concentrate, because we had gotten to a point where he couldn't run a store and run the group, and it just was the right thing to do at the time. And then he decided to leave. So I got switched in the new regime. I got moved over to ThinkIndie Distribution, which is a distribution company we had started a few years earlier as an answer to all the big boxes getting limited edition product and special product from artists that we had groomed over the years. It's like, well, why are they getting this special piece, and the stores that have cared about them for 20 years or for 10 years or for 2 years aren't getting the special piece? So we started going to the bands and the labels and saying, all right, hey, we want our own piece. And that's how ThinkIndie was born. And Don and Andrea Pascal did A&R for the first few years. I mean, we all pitched in where we could, but Don was he was running it. He was definitely the spearhead for it. And when he left, they were like, okay, we want you to head up A&R for ThinkIndie. So I got my specialty show going on Sunday mornings, when suddenly I'm doing marketing for a group of independent record stores. All of a sudden I'm doing A&R. I moved from marketing to A&R for the independent distribution company. And about the same time, the morning show host at the radio station I was on, it was a AAA station here in town that was around for 3 or 4 years. The morning show host father got sick, and the PD called me and said, "Hey, can you fill in for a couple of weeks in the morning while he goes and takes care of his dad?" I was like, "Yeah, I can get up early for a couple of weeks and do that." He never came back. he stayed home. And so it's like, okay, what are you doing here? He's like, "Well, why don't you keep doing the morning show?" And that was 2008, and it's almost 2022, and I'm still getting up at 4:30 and on the air at 6 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. I'm still doing the Sunday show from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the new music show, and still doing distribution. And so those are the hats I wear. It's
all right.
Radio hat, independent distribution hat, and just I'm lucky, man. I get to live in Birmingham. I never thought I could work in the music business in Birmingham, and I got to do it before you could work in the business wherever you wanted to work in the business. I mean, you've moved around. Now that technology's made it possible to live anywhere and still be in the business, I was able to do that, be where I wanted to be beforehand, and I'm still able to sit here and do that. And I don't know what the future holds. Radio stations have come and gone, but somehow my show has stayed on the air. And the current station I'm on, Birmingham Mountain Radio, we started as an internet-only station back in 2010. Within 2 years, we were doing sales on par with some of the terrestrial radio stations in town. So they came knocking, going, "Hey, what if we gave you a signal?" We ended up working with Summit Media, who we do a ad sales share with, and they give us a stick, and we share the advertising, and we still are independently owned. We still make all our music decisions, all of our programming decisions, all of our promotional decisions, and they just give us a team of salesmen to go out and sell the ads. So it's been a really beneficial relationship for both of us, and we'll celebrate 11 years next week as a station, and 9 years with we still push the internet side. I mean, we were internet only station, so we don't shy away from that. I mean, it's been mentioned right next to the signal every time. It's 107.3 FM Birmingham and bhammountainradio.com.
There's a couple of things there I want to just tease out a little. One is, it's pretty obvious that there's a common thread through a lot of the things you have your hands in, which have to do with, I'm going to say it poorly, but there's like a lack of dogmatism in terms of like meeting the audience and meeting the consumer and meeting the fan where they are. Instead of saying like, it's a digital world now, and that's the only way you're going to get what we do. Or we love physical so much, we're going to turn our back on the new stuff. Or, it's fascinating to me that it's almost the same exact story that you told around the music formats in the distribution business. It's the same story in your broadcasting business, right? Like it's super interesting.
Trust me, it's something that I've pondered so many times. It's like, how did I end up here, and how do both of my careers mirror each other so well? And it's back to your dogma. Maybe it's kismet. I don't know. There's people out there, and I refuse to say, well, it's a generational thing. I know just as many young folks that listen to my radio shows as I do folks my age and older. I mean, and I think part of it is the music that we play and the music that we concentrate on and the programming. I mean, we're a commercial radio station that acts more like a non-commercial radio station. We've got a dozen specialty programs, that everything from a 80s dance kind of show on Friday nights to a locals only show on Sunday nights, to a alternative new music show on Sunday nights, to a show called the She Show that's all female artists on Wednesday nights, and then some. I mean, I can go on and on. I got my show, which, like I said, is a new music show, but it's kind of a Sunday chill out show, and been fortunate. People, I tell people all the time, I'm a conduit. It's not about me. I know my name's on it, but that's because we couldn't come up with a name, and we just finally were like, let's just call it Reg's Coffee House.
Well, the other thing, though, it's super interesting is that there's no, like, new can be good, new can be bad, old could be good, old could be bad. Like, there's not like this fetishization of anything. Like, just because it's old doesn't have to give it some mystical power, but it also doesn't mean we dismiss it.
Right. Some of my favorite times over the years, I can remember one time in particular. I was playing an old Bonnie Raitt tune from, I think, a 1972 album of hers, Get Up. But a song called Love Has No Pride, which is just a beautiful song. And I was playing it one morning and the phone started lighting up. It's like, is this new Sheryl Crow? Well, who is this? What is this? And it's like, no, actually, this is a song that's 20 something years old that you've never heard before. It takes me back to the old NBC tagline of, if you hadn't seen it, it's new to you. Well, if you hadn't heard it, it's new to you. Yeah. So old music can be new music. And if it's presented in a format where people are actually expecting new music, then it's even more surprising to them when you say, no, that's from decades ago, but it still holds up, doesn't it? It's still, I light up every time I put on a song from the 60s or the 70s, and it bumps up against something that came out last week. And they work so well right next to each other. It's got a language of its own, so it's fun. It's fun to see my kid get excited about something that I was excited about when I was their age, and it's fun to see the two of us, me get excited about something that's their generation. It's that community and that culture and that connection that humans live for. We're social animals, and that helps the socializing.
Is what you've been a part of building, do you think there's an element to it that's unique to the melting pot, or whatever bad metaphor? Is it unique to Birmingham, or have you built something there? Are the elements that came together something that can be a model for other places?
I don't think it's unique to Birmingham. I will say this, before I had the radio show, but when I was helping program the festival, and I could always see that there was a group of music lovers that would rally around something like what I was doing. You just could see it. At the time, there was a little magazine called The Leak that came out of Birmingham. It's a little fanzine, and it had a CD in it, and it was 13 songs a month, and you subscribed to it. And I saw the people that got it and how they loved it. And I was like, okay, that's a physical version of what I'd like to do in the radio medium. And so I would actually use the Leak CDs sometimes for some of the artists that I was playing in the early days of the show. I'd pull them off of that. I don't think that it's something that's just Birmingham centric. I think it's music lover centric, and there's music lovers in every city and every state and every area of the country. I have listeners across the globe. I hear from people from the Philippines. I hear from people over in Europe.
That's neat.
They've heard about the show, or that somebody from the States has moved there and turned them on to it. And then with the internet, we all know how that's everybody's local. So it's cool.
That's something I love about this is when I get a random, message from somebody that says, "Oh my God, I heard your conversation with so-and-so." And I'm like, wait a minute, how did you hear that? Yep. Oh yeah, I put it out there and you happen to receive it.
I think if anything, I get tired of the people who are trying to act like it doesn't exist, like or doesn't need to. In today's world, this is not something that needs to be, we're past that. You're archaic, there's no reason for you to be doing that. It's like, as long as people want it, then why would you say that? And can't both worlds exist at the same time? I stream plenty of music, but I also listen to plenty of physical music, and it doesn't affect how I feel about either. Doesn't
make you a bad person.
I was at a luncheon yesterday, and the person who was talking to me, she was almost like she was embarrassed to say it. She's like, I'm one of those people that doesn't have satellite radio. And I was like, I know you won't believe this, but there's a lot of people like you that don't have satellite radio. She's like, I listen to local radio. That's all I have in my vehicle. And I don't like to listen to my phone in my vehicle. And I was like, hey, I love you. I was like, but it's okay, if you want to do the other things. But I'm glad that you like, and now we haven't talked about this, and this comes back to your last question. My entire career, I have always seen the importance of diversification and localization. It was one that TV station I mentioned earlier. The GM there was all about diversifying what they had on the air, and every chance he got, he localized it as much as possible. And in a world, and fast forward 20 years, where it's become so much more global and nebulous, people still want to know what's going on in their backyard, and they still want to feel that connection to their community, whether they live in the community or they lived in the community. I hear from people all the time who've moved out of Birmingham, but still listen to Birmingham Mountain Radio because they want to know what's going on back home, and they want to know what's hot back home. And I'm sure they listen to and watch stuff in their new communities too. But that local element, if it's your home, it's where you live, you're going to want to be attached to it. And then the diversification part of it has become even more important because everything's gotten so splintered. It's crazy not to why would you play the same 100 songs on a radio station? I don't get it, because everybody can go anywhere they want to hear thousands and thousands of songs and whatever they want. They can make their own Spotify radio station playlist, so it behooves you, in my opinion, to give them more options and not just treat them like they can't handle it.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, because it would be a derelict of duty to not go there. At the end of the day, it's a humanization, and it's important to, the culture, the country. Like, it's not trivial. These are the things that keep people less alienated, less fearful, less distrustful. It's really hard to hate somebody that you share a cultural interest with. It doesn't mean it erases all differences, but that's not the goal either.
Right.
It's just a coming together. It's an opportunity it's just an opportunity to come together and to counter a lot of the underside of all the amazing things we get through modernization. I love being able to stream music. I drive a 30-year-old car and I have a Bluetooth receiver in it. Like, I am the living embodiment of what you just said in that regard. Right. And that's a phenomenal way to listen to music. And to your point, this little box gives me everything in the known universe musically. And then I come in the house and I have my record collection. It's just, you can have both. You should have both. You should have it all. You should have it all, because there's a use case for all the different scenarios.
Variety is the spice of life, right?
Exactly.
It holds true to this day.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you making time to talk.
Man, it's good to see your face and hear your voice. It's been way too long. I always enjoyed working with you over the years, and I'm just glad we're both still doing it and both still loving it. And life is obviously treating us as well as it can right now. So enjoy it while we can.
Thank you so much, Scott Register. Thank you, Aunt Taylor and the team at Light. And as always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On. Get and share all of our past episodes, write a review, and even send us a message through our website, spotlightonpodcast.com. If you like what we're up to here, please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Join us again next week. In the meantime, be safe and stay in touch.
And I'll be here.